John, what is a MOBA?
I'm going to confess that I'm more of an Overwatch fan when it comes to watching esports, but I do know what League of Legends is. I do know what Dota is. I'm vaguely familiar where they come from as a game. I mean, it's some kind of Warcraft 3 mod type thing that kind of spawned
there's
out.
a weird lineage to
Right?
them.
Like, I've heard the stories about how that happened, and I played the progenitor of those. So I've got an idea of what it must be like, even though I've never played them.
Before any of the kids who are playing them now existed, we were playing Warcraft 3. Okay, enough of us just kind of talking about how old we are at this point. We are covering 2 games today, and because this casual Friday format was just a good way for us to get together and talk about things, so we have now I'm going to say it wrong because I say it wrong every time. Skytear. I always want to say
Definitely
Skytear.
tear.
Okay.
It's not tier.
Okay. It's 100% tier in my mind.
Yes.
And then we have the other tear game of these monsters coming through gates in the sky, torn asunder, that being Gates of Delirium. So we're going to cover both of those today and just kind of talk through and give our impressions. So maybe we'll start with Skytear here. This isn't just like a boxed board game. Let's talk about what this thing is and how it relates to this whole MOBA thing we've been talking about.
Okay, so where do we want to start then? Because I guess a brief overview of what a MOBA is and how this captures that is that for anyone who doesn't know, a MOBA is essentially where you have a collection of little minions who are generally kind of automated or maybe very simplistically controlled. They're going to charge the battlefield, typically trying to take out a couple of towers, 2-3 towers of an enemy's down these battle lanes. And when they knock out one of those towers, they're going to continue down that battle lane to the enemy's home port, whatever it is, their castle, their what have you. But in the meantime, the players are actively controlling typically one or more hero characters that are unique and have special powers. Something like Dota and League of Legends, you've got your one character that you pick. And there's a whole big meta about who you play and what powers they have and who is it good against and whatever.
And there's like leveling up progression or a sense of getting like stronger as
unlocking
you go.
New powers.
And so it becomes more climactic as you go. And so initially there's kind of like skirmish-ish struggles where there's
very
less
much
movement.
A tug of war too, because of course, you've got these heroes, the heroes and the minions are going to meet somewhere in the middle, and there's going to be a push and pull as one side gains advantage and pushes past the enemy to the next thing.
Okay, so that's what this game is. Skytear is one of many board games at this point that is trying to translate MOBAs into a board game format, and so it's not a real-time game.
Space Cadets Dice Duel, but with a MOBA thing.
It could work.
Hucking dice at each other.
But that's one of the interesting things is because I think of MOBAs as very much a skill-based type of video game where you need to be able to like keep up with this accelerated tempo of the game.
I think it's about managing multiple things and then triggering things at the right time and watching all these cooldowns. Reaction
time is so much part of what makes MOBA and the thrill of playing a MOBA game. And so that's something that I don't know will ever be truly translated into a board game. And we can talk about that within the context of Skytear here in just a bit. But this game, this box, is not just a box board game. This is the beginning of a whole line of games where, or I guess content that's intended from the get-go to be like a actual hobby unto itself, right? Like it has tournament rules. Like what are some of the hooks in here?
It's pretty ambitious, honestly, right out the gate for a newer game. And it definitely has its sights set on being some kind of community. It's going to have a community. It's going to have a competitive scene, a meta, an app that you can adjust, that's going to adjust the value of certain things, to vary the meta, which is something you see in a MOBA. It really wants to emulate that because that is one thing. You have the 8 characters that come in this box, but then there's what is there? There's 16 more characters that you can buy.
Right.
There's the 4 different factions. Each have a pack that has 4 more characters. And that's a thing that you get with MOBAs. You get patches that'll update balance.
Right,
you'll have potentially 100, 200 characters, however many it is. You'll have tons of these characters to choose from. That'll change up how the match goes. And even the rulebook mentions competitive, which, considering that this was a Kickstarter game, I have my doubts about how quickly that's going to get off the. It seems a little forced from the get-go, if I'm being honest. It feels like that's the kind of thing you want to grow organically.
Totally. And some of the biggest games out there didn't necessarily have the sights set initially on becoming these organized play types of things. Then again, esports, you look at a new video game coming out, and very much a game comes packaged knowing full well of what it wants it to eventually grow into. So maybe that's one more thing that's reflecting the digital counterpart of it, is the intent from the get-go. We have systems in place that if we can grow this community, that this thing could already sustain this type of play. But as for the game, like, you and I have been playing hobby board games for a long time, and that's not necessarily how we approach board games at this point in our lives. We both have a long and storied history with competitive LCGs and CCGs and that kind of stuff. But typically, when we pick up a game, I think most people watching this channel as well are going to pick up a game and go like, this is what I'm going to play with my friends occasionally among all the other board games that I own. And so when you're actually looking at it from the context of that, you have this just single arena, or I guess a double-sided board for two different modes of play with different lanes
higher
set
player
up.
count.
Exactly. And you have 8 hero characters broken into 4 different elements or colors.
4 different factions, yeah.
Yeah. And so what's happening here is that you're assembling 2 of the factions together because you're going to need 4 heroes in order to play as one entire side versus another. And so you're just mashing them together. I have my red faction with my green faction, and that's my dudes. Or the red and blue, or the yellow and green, or any combination therein. And then the other aspect of this game that's going on is there's also this big freaking like skeletal monster thing on the side. What's up with this, dude?
So if we go back to the core idea of the game is, you look at like a League of Legends or a Dota, and it's they usually have the 3 battle lanes, and then at each battle lane there's a control point, a tower somewhere in the center that you're trying to push past, right. or each team has control points rather. And so this game does the same thing. It has a left and a right lane, each of which has towers, each of which you're going to play a tug of war over these control points in the center, and the more you push them forward, the more you're going to smash down the enemy tower, getting to that home goal point, the nexus in this game. So in the center lane, though, instead of repeating that formula, in the center lane to vary it up is a third lane that you can compete over, but instead that is the Skytear. And I didn't read the lore, so I'm not entirely sure why we're fighting over a big tear in the sky. It has a monster in it. I guess we control the monster.
Because we're fighting over the monster. He's so cool.
Right. So I guess we're fighting. It seems like a thing to avoid, but basically, that's exactly what you're gonna do. You're gonna, if you gain control of that, you gain control of the monster that's in this Skytear, the outsider. And so this guy is just gonna wreck face as soon as he comes out on the board. So you can neglect one of your other lanes to then take this one and just wreck face with the monster at that point.
Yeah, and aside from that, the rhythm of the game is pretty straightforward. You got 5 rounds. The victory condition is either that you are able to push in and do enough damage to someone's home base, which has to come after this tug of war happens on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. Your heroes can die by losing health through a variety of means, but they respawn. And then there's also some victory conditions which are randomly set up. There's 3 alternate victory conditions that are there. And then if no one has won by the end of the 5th round, there's like some tiebreakers. So the actual meat and potatoes of the game is just, I take my turn with one of my heroes, and then you take your turn. Both our heroes are exhausted, and we have to use each of our alive heroes throughout a round, and then we finish up the round. One of the things that immediately was noticeable for both of us was the arc of I guess resource as the game progressed, because like it reflects the round level, right? It's 1-to-1.
Right. So your hand, you aside from the basic actions you can take with each hero, and you're going to activate each hero in turn. So there's figure there's about 4 turns per player in a round. But at any point in the round, you could be playing these spells from your hand, or these cards that do they're temporary things typically, and you can play them as reactions or actions. The mana that you use to spend, or that you can spend to use these cards, is based on what round it is. So there is an escalation, which I gotta say, like, this was a small curve as far as escalation goes, but I do like when that mechanic's implemented in a game, a gradual. You see it with like Magic the Gathering, as you're putting more lands out, you get more spectacular effects. But in a game like that, it's unpredictable.
I guess, we have a broad structure here, and to just hop right into opinions on the game, that was one of the things that I thought was the coolest structurally. But one thing that I continually felt as we were playing it is that a lot of the cards that were in my hand didn't feel particularly useful. There were some that were like, oh man, this is so good. But other cards in my hand, because I had so few resources, I mean, in round 2, I have 2 resources to spend, and a card may cost 2 or more resources to use. I was like, the choice of a good card in my hand at this point is obvious. And the abilities didn't really always feel like it was tactical or useful. I mean, did you find that at all in the game?
So I guess my general takeaway on the game was that there was a lot going on that I did like, but there was also a few things going on that I felt like it was maybe doing too much. Mm-hmm. The card play, I thought, well, you could have a game like this, and you could lump. I'm going to go on a tangent briefly and just say that this
that's
game...
what this show is for. That's our job here.
90% tangent. But you could call this game a MOBA, but really, at its heart, what a MOBA in this format is it's a skirmish game. It's a small-scale skirmish game. It's not an epic war game, Axis and Allies, but it's a small, like, battle lore kind of game.
Yeah.
Which is great. I like those, and it's always hard to find really good implementations of that. And so the things it did in a skirmish setting were pretty solid. I liked a lot of what it did. But then it tacked on this card mechanic that I felt like you could have an entire skirmish game that had a hand of cards, that was a robust game, really focusing on the cards. And this one just kind of had the cards. The cards served other purposes, but they didn't often conflict with the playing of them, if that makes sense. Like,
Right.
You could play the cards to boost some of the other aspects of what you were doing, and it meant sacrificing things in your hand, but never to a degree where I felt like, well, man, my hand is just empty because I've done all this, and now I can't do this.
One of the reasons why I wanted to play it with you is because I know that this is a type of game that you are really keen on. I mean, you like skirmish games. You're the guy who's like, I want to play Mage Wars. Let's play Mage Wars. And I'm like, I don't really want to play Mage Wars. But, we've played plenty of aggressive skirmish head-to-head games in the past, and this is one that I wanted to not just have my perspective on, but also yours. So, even if it had a little too much going on, what were some of your takeaways of like things that you really enjoyed about it?
Let's start the baseline positive. It really did capture the spirit of the things. I was respawning characters like it's a video game. I felt like there was a cooldown on some of my characters. If they died at a certain time, they were going to come back, and I'm just counting the turns.
This is the third MOBA implementation in board games that I've played. I played Battle for Eternia. I've played ATK, which I don't know that ATK actually ever came out, but I played it in a prototype form at a board game convention, and then I played this at this point, and this is the one that felt truest, not just to the presentation, going through the motions of like interpreting a MOBA, but actually kind of having that 3-way push and pull and trying to account for so many different things at once. It didn't have that tempo aspect, the frantic ability to react to everything, but the kind of scope and the pressure that you're under totally felt like it was the truest to the digital form that I'd seen yet.
It was, and it really did have that. I mean, as much as you can with a turn-based thing where you got to capture some of the tension, but it's not the live action part of it. Well, the tension I felt was, feeling that enjoyment of watching my minions pile up behind one of the control points and just push it towards your base as I was sacrificing progress on the other ones, and deciding, do I respawn my guys to slow you down? Do I just steamroll ahead?
Right.
A lot of that was a lot of fun to engage with. I like the combat system, which is always a plus.
Yeah.
A pseudo-random combat system, kind of in the same... I've seen a number of games do, like the Gloomhaven, where you've got a certain amount of damage plus a modifier. I gotta say, that's better than pure dice or pure, statistics.
Yeah. I thought the combat was reliable with a little unknown element, which gave some suspense to the game and unpredictability. So that way you weren't always guaranteed. You had moments where you're like, do I take the risk because this could be an excellent play if I get the right card, which most likely I'm going to get the right card. And you can kind of play with probabilities in your mind, and it's not just random chance entirely. I loved the moment of playing with the big chunky monster who just comes into play at the end of the round if you were the one to capture the middle point, and that guy feels devastating when he comes onto the board.
The first turn I brought him out, and you felt so good about yourself, basically making all the progress on one and watching me make zero progress on the other lane until I took that middle one as the last one to evaluate, and I just was like, nope, 3 or 4 of your guys are going to drop off.
Right. I mean, the presentation is really nice. The miniatures, the artwork, they both are totally what you'd expect out of a bigger Kickstarter game at this point. Feels well produced. The miniature sculpts are really cool. A detail you noticed when we were playing was that the bases have texture. Like, I didn't notice that until you pointed it out, and I was like, oh yeah, that's actually really cool. It's not just a flat base.
I mean, I'm not at that tier of like miniature painting or anything where I'm going to base my own minis where you,
right.
or texture them or anything like that. So for the guy who is an out of the box miniature user who occasionally paints them just for fun, and never gets that serious, it's kind of nice to see, the standard flat base have some texture.
The other thing that I thought was really good about the game is the fact that you're bringing in these different victory conditions. Like, having that sort of variety and versatility, like, it gives you different strategic approaches. It gives you kind of like a Hail Mary to go for if you're kind of losing in the struggle amongst the different capture points on the board. And that's like board game 101 at this point in 2020, to have variable victory conditions or some sort of avenue that gives replay value. So I thought that was great.
Well, and that bears mentioning that also lends the conciseness of the game some success too, because if you can't, it's not this endless push and pull if it's a tie game or anything like that. There's both a round counter where you end, and there's these alternate victory conditions, which very much will keep it fresh, because the objective may not always be a simple, I'm going to steamroll to this point. It may be, I lose entirely if I don't watch this side.
What was your pervasive feelings coming out of the game? Like, did you feel like, I really dig this? Or, like, did something hold you back? Because I feel like we were both kind of like,
it sounds pretty positive for what I think our real reactions might really be. So here's the thing. I liked the gameplay overall. I think even with the complaint about the cards, maybe not being as robust or maybe just being added on or not that relevant, I think everything else was pretty solid about the game. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. But I do feel like it could have benefited maybe from some of the strategy I've seen in some of the other bigger companies out there right now, where they're seeing that games like, well, you mentioned Mage Wars. If we could just have a brief aside and say, I grew up playing Magic. From 1995 on, I played Magic for like 15 years, and that was a hobby in and of itself.
Totally.
Hundreds and thousands of dollars and boxes of cards. And then I got into tabletop board gaming as a broader hobby, and now I have 100 games on a shelf or 200 games on a shelf. And this game, if it were to be in my collection, would be one of many games. And I have that problem with something like the Mage Wars, which I also got into pretty heavily, is that I just can't, in something that requires me to build an army and invest in variety, I can't afford that kind of commitment in my hobbies. And I think the market for gamers who can is a lot smaller than the market for gamers who want an experience that they can open a box and just play.
I totally agree. I think that, like, if you are someone who is really in love with either League of Legends or Dota or the Blizzard one that's not coming to mind.
Heroes of the Storm?
Heroes of the Storm. There we go. See, you're up on this lingo. You know what's up with your Blizzard games. So if you're way into these and you're looking for a MOBA board game, then this is probably going to be the best thing that you can get at this point. And the presentation is good. Like it's overall a pretty good game. To me, I wish that it were less focused on being this long, drawn-out experience that you're going to have to invest in, you're going to have to dedicate your time completely to, and then you're going to have to get all these add-ons. Like, I hated that there were hints of added versatility to the game that weren't even in the starter kit. Like, the big Axiom dude, the guy who comes from the center who you plop on the board.
Yeah, the big outsider guy, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about that structurally as whichever one that you have is going to come into play. Well, in the base game, that's the only one that you have. Same thing with whoever plays second ends up having like some special power that they can activate once per game. Well, you only have one of those in the box, but
it's modular. It's not printed on the board.
Exactly.
It's a card, so you definitely think you can get more of those.
Yeah, and I wish that there was more complete versatility out of the box. Like, I don't mind that there's going to be other stuff out there. I don't mind when there's an LCG that's going to have more content that I'm never going to invest in. I just wish that the base game itself had a little bit of variety in each of the modular parts.
And I know this is casual Friday, not super hyper analytical Friday, but I mean, just
it can be both.
Yeah, right. See, casually analyzing this way to the extreme. I think if you look at some of the game companies, I've fallen in love with Marvel Champions recently, and if you look at that compared to Fantasy Flight's other big co-op LCG Arkham Horror, there's a notable difference in that Arkham Horror demands a certain amount of deck building. Yeah, the core set you can play right out of the box, but after that, once you start investing in it, you have a pool of cards that you want to build on.
Right.
And that requires investing and understanding and knowing and collecting these cards. Same with Magic and Mage Wars.
Totally.
But Magic has such a body, has such an audience, it can afford to be that special. Whereas these other games are competing with narrower and narrower niches. And so look at what they did with Champions. Every hero out of the box is completely playable. Every pack you buy is completely playable as it is, and fairly well balanced. I mean, you could improve it, but the point being, the idea is I can go on any given day of the week and I can go, I pick hero A, I mix it with stack B, and I add in the basic cards C. Boom, I've got a deck I can play with. I don't have to spend an hour planning. Right, this game actually demanded that you spend probably as much time planning and drafting the heroes and building their power deck if you had enough heroes to draft and had the power decks to modify.
Totally.
With more than the starter box. And I just think it really lost... It missed out on a bigger audience by just... I pick a hero, and this hero has a deck they come with. These 10 cards, that's it.
Well, I guess the takeaway on this for both of us is that these are me problems, or I guess us problems, in that the game is doing structurally things, meta things outside of the game itself that aren't necessarily appealing to us. But, if you are looking for a MOBA game, or just a skirmish game that does something different that you may not have seen in existing board game titles out there, then I think this delivers on that. You just kind of got to know what you're getting into, and if you're okay with the structure of the game being that either you get this one box and it's going to feel a little bit limited. I mean, you still have variety in the combination of heroes. The heroes have a more advanced side and a more straightforward side. There's going to be the different victory conditions that are going to change up how a game plays. But you're still going to have those noticeable lack of modular elements that would come with expandable content. If you're okay with it either being that or something that you're going to invest heavily in, then I think this totally does the job. So we're through Skytear. Skytear.
And we've already come to the conclusion that this Casual Friday is just going to be long-winded.
Yeah,
and we've already committed to 2 reviews in one.
When we're talking double feature, it's just like going to a movie and being like, oh, geez, I didn't really think about how much I was committing to by seeing 2 movies back to back.
Right.
So, Gates of Delirium. This little tiny game, like this little interesting Euro area control Lovecraftian game.
If we're being honest, if we're being blunt and very straightforward about it, it's Ticket to Ride.
Okay.
But with Cthulhu.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of Ethnos in there.
Yeah, definitely more Ethnos DNA in it. I would go to Ticket to Ride because that's like saying Catan. Like, everybody's going to know what you mean, more or less. It means set collection. This is at its heart set collection. There's some area control
Totally.
that is driven or drives the set collection. But at the end of the day, you are trying to collect either, map pieces or forgotten text or the gate cards. And let's cut to the chase and say the best thing about this game is the graphic design for me.
Yeah, the angles.
I don't even know if it's just graphic design. What's the word for it? But the way the gate cards stack together, that as you lay them on the table, you lay them at an angle to form the gate.
Yeah, I actually think that this is something that tapped into the more intrinsic nature of Lovecraftian mythos. Like, there's always an aspect of it that, like, the very fabric of our reality has some eldritch properties woven into it, and to have like geometric aspects, the angles of the cards being different, such that a set of 4 is going to complete the circle, and a slightly different angle is going to be a set of 5 and a set of 7. Like, that is purely a graphic design aspect of the game. Cards. But that is a glorious way of representing some sort of thematic property that I would have never thought of, and it works so well.
Well, and then let's talk about the other sets you could collect. You can also complete maps, one or more maps to I can't remember if they were to lost areas or whatever they were, but each map had 4 pieces: northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, and you stack them all together and you've got a complete map. You don't just make a pile of cards and turn in a set 1 through 4. You've got a map.
Right.
Your lost manuscripts. You would collect numbers 1 through 20 and try to get a string of as many as you could together. And you could read them off the weird poetry on there like it's the King in Yellow.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool is that, the maps themselves are going to be uniform in that it's, the different areas, quadrants.
It's the same map every time.
But the poetry, the incantation is 1 through 20, and those are unique cards that there's only 20 of them in the game. And you get more points if you string them together. So, if you have entry 6, it's only going to be so many points if you don't also have 5 or 7. So once again, it's doing something that's very mechanical, having the sequential numbers. But there's also a thematic aspect to why that would be more powerful too, is because you're linking together verses from an overall scripture, which is a really cool element. But like, fundamentally, I think we should, before getting into the like set collection thing, like when you sit down at the board, there's regions that are, I assume, going to be like Northeast United States, like Arkham-esque area, New England.
I don't remember what the regions were now.
Colored regions. They were green, white, purple.
I'll say this, the board was a little underwhelming at first. Almost kind of like the Ethnos board, where it's not that anything. It's okay. It's a landmass. It's divided. Great.
It
serves its purpose. Yeah.
It's a Euro map, and then you're going to be putting your unique sculpted little
meeples.
Yeah, your cultists out on the board, or investigators.
They were investigators. Now I'm a little vague on the theme. I'm not sure, because sometimes it seemed like we were doing the crazy person thing, like we're trying to summon the elder gods. Sometimes we weren't.
But that's another element, and probably the big gimmick of the game. So yes, it's a set collection game, and yes, there is an area control element of when the portals, in particular, one of the sets that you can collect, when it's fully collected, then you're going to register points at whatever the corresponding region is. An elder god has been summoned there, and then based on the investigators that are there, players get points. And then you remove everything from there because presumably a Shoggoth ate it. Whatever.
Elder Muncher.
Yeah, Elder Muncher. There we go. But the gimmick of the game that kind of sets it apart from other things is that the cards that you play in your hand are double-sided. So you can flip them upside down. They have 2 panels, and one is for a sane turn or a sane round, and one's for an insane round. Is that the terminology that they use? And so if you are the first person on a round, you have this big honking token that you're going to flip over and declare whether it's a sane round or an insane round. And that's going to determine the orientation of cards that you can play. And that's also going to be the type of sets that you're collecting. So on sane rounds, you're putting out investigators, and you're also going to be getting the maps, and you're getting the
little collectibles.
Yeah.
You're getting your collectibles is what I call
the runes, which are like I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to get a bunch of these there.
I've got no better actions on my turn. That's what I felt like they were, yeah.
Yeah. And then the insane rounds, which is swapping around investigators. Like, you can manipulate the board at that point, not just add things to it, and then getting the very ticket to ride. Like, I need 6 blues. What are 6 blues? Well, it's an elder one of some sort, but really it just boils down to I'm getting 6 blues or 5 pinks or whatever it is.
Core mechanic reminded me a lot of like Ragnarok in Blood Rage. The goal of the game, if you could sum it up in a few words, is there's these other things happening with these collectibles, and really those can be a lot of points, but a lot of times those are also sort of a side mechanic that you're trying to do while you're doing the main thing.
Totally.
The main thing is you want to get investigators into regions, then you want to blow those regions up Ragnarok style with an Elder Gate of blue or green or what have you.
It just occurred to me that the color out of space might have just been blue.
And just so we're clear, that what I'm picturing coming through these gates is the Langoliers from that old, like,
yes!
the terrible CG Langoliers that look like Pac-Man monsters. Those are Elder Munchers. So that's the gist of the game, is that you're trying to establish presence, area control style, but then you're also trying to blow up that presence by collecting the gates for that. So everybody telegraph your moves tremendously. I'm putting investigators here, and I also happen to be collecting the gate that matches that territory. Gosh, right. I guess you should probably put investigators there too. Or snipe those gates for me. And it's very Ticket to Ride in how it lays out 4 gates to choose from, or you can take a one off the top of the deck, and so it's very much got the classic set collection.
Right.
But what I think one of the mechanics that you mentioned that I really liked was that what I do on my turn is totally driven by what the first player chose this turn to be. Any game where I have the same hand of cards that could be played in 3 different ways is going to get my interest a little more than one that doesn't. And so the fact that I have these cards that maybe some of the effects are better on the insane side, but this is a sane round and I have to do something.
Right.
So do I really want to play this card on a sane round when the insane action is so good? If I don't, my sane turn might be kind of a waste too, though.
Right. And one of the coolest things about the game to me was that as you're playing cards, there are some cards that are going to be less powerful versions of the actions that you can take, but you also get this resource that's like a commodity that you can spend for bonus actions on your turn. And the bonus actions are more escalating in power the more that you spend, but they can do some really tricky things like switching. I want to say one is switching it from a sane round to an insane round, which can have very, very big ramifications.
Nice little manipulations of the basic systems, yeah. Right.
So you have this fixed, like, I have the set things that I can do, but if I really need to play them in a certain way, or have the ability to do something different, or to have different cards in my hand, I have a few ways that I can manipulate that with this very precious resource. And sometimes you'll want to bank on the flexibility that those resources give you, so you play less powerful cards in order to accrue more of those resources, which I thought was just a really elegant, I guess, set of choices for you to have to play around with, because the game itself is overall pretty straightforward. Like, it's not a complex game by any means. It's very approachable. I think it's very easy to understand the gimmick mechanism, and as soon as you played like 2 rounds, you're like, I got it. I know what this game is.
Which could be considered a benefit, but may also have negative consequences for replayability, like long term.
Right. But I think that strategically it gives you enough hooks and ways of interacting with the game that there are some interesting things there. As far as replayability, there's a system for adding different variable world effects. I think of enchant worlds in Magic. How good were enchant worlds.
That tells you how old of a Magic player you must be if you could still enchant world something. there was a sequence of the elder gods that you would summon. So you'd open gate number 1, nothing major happened. Gate number 2, though, might trigger one of these cards to come out that would modify some small aspect of the game, but enough to make some sort of some choices weigh a little more or less.
Yeah, either end game scoring or some sort of like in-game property that'll affect.
Yeah, like a break the rules kind of thing. Like now you can, when you place investigators, you can also on sane rounds do this or insane rounds do that kind of thing.
Right. So what was your takeaway after playing?
So I may be forcing thematic a little bit too much here and say that I'll take the insane review on this. If sanity is pure mechanical analytic, is this a good game? I'll let you deal with that. I'm just going to take the insane choice and say, from an emotional, passionate standpoint, how did I react to the game? I really enjoyed. It did something that sometimes you really just want a game to do, which is feel good playing with the toys. And I liked making my little gates. I liked building my stack of cards, and I like to form the dark poetry, and I liked building my maps. Strategically, there were a lot of good things I liked about it, but those were things that I walked away from thinking, if I wanted to own one set collection game, I might pick this just because it differentiates itself on some of those things rather well. Right.
There are a few things I really like about it. One is it felt very out of the box for what Lovecraft-inspired games are. Like, usually they're these big, broad adventure games, or they're going to be little, tiny, jokey games. And this is a completely different approach to it, but it doesn't feel like a pasted-on theme. Like, all the things I just mentioned are ways in which these like eerie and fun, silly Lovecraftian things have been integrated into this easy, approachable, area controlled set collection game in smart ways. Like, there are things that are like, oh dude, I am making this portal and it's the cards going around in a circle, or it's I'm gathering the incantation, or all the different runes that I'm collecting, or the insane turn versus sane turns. Like, there's enough integration between the mechanics and theme that it feels like it's delivering on the Lovecraftian promise of it, which I think is cool. It feels very counter to a lot of Lovecraftian games out there. And also, I think that for the weight of game that it is, this does have a lot of options for things that you can do in your turn. And like I said, that resource that lets you interact with it, like, I was kind of surprised by how cool of a game it was.
Yeah, I was a little underwhelmed at first by just the presentation. It's a fairly small presence on the table. The board is kind of bland. As compared to, like, it really was just a functional map in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I was and it's a score track and a map. And so I was kind of like, well, what am I getting into here? But it gave you a lot more choices than just a couple of cards in your hand would have otherwise given you.
Right.
It kind of multiplied the number of choices you have. So I think it gave you more for a lighter middleweight game that it is.
Yeah, the only things that I have to say that are bad about it is I think that there is going to be some limited replay value, like you talked about earlier. I mean, if it's a game that you break out every couple of months, or even once a month or something, like, it's a cool little game. Or if you're looking for something that you can knock out in 45 minutes, it is something that is totally fine for that, but you're not going to get a huge amount of variety. This isn't Cthulhu Wars.
It's one I wouldn't break out all the time because it's not going to be rich and varied every single time, but it's simple enough that I think you could afford to break it out less often and still fully understand it every time you break it out.
The other thing is squared cornered cards. Like, it is inexcusable, and I will not tolerate it in like future productions here. Like, this is where I am drawing the line. Like, this game has to be the last square cornered card hobby game. This was so surprising to find a game that didn't round its corners, which, of course, the reason why you round corners is because they don't catch on things and it doesn't mush up. And as someone who doesn't sleeve their cards,
get the dog-eared corners.
Yeah, I don't want the mush corners. I have a kid in my house. If he if he even looks at this, like, all the corners are going to be mushed up. I know it. So that was a really weird choice and is something that immediately stuck out to me, and I couldn't help but think of every time I was touching one of those cards.
And the gate cards being square, it didn't bother me because those were functional, and I was never going to sleeve those anyway. They're weird shaped.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, that's 2 games down and a very long-winded conversation because we love talking about board games. So if you want to see more of this and you want to have John and I talk about games, if there's topics that you want us to cover, if you want to see more reviews or more top 10 lists or anything like that, then just let us know in the comments below. If you want this longer format or if you want shorter, more concise stuff, we'll take it into consideration.
Could we be snappier and faster? Probably. If you held our feet to the coals?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, for now, thanks for coming on to the show, John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are not concise at all. And now we're stuck with this because we're in the intro.
Said I think we need to mention that.
Edit it around it, yeah.
Yeah.